Today I want to talk about death. Sometimes it's expected, like when your fish dies while you're on vacation. Sometimes it's a total surprise, like when your fish jumps out of its bowl and shoots your dog. Either way, it teaches the kids an important lesson. But not everyone responds to death the same way. Some take it as an opportunity to honor the one who's passed. Some deal with it in what we might call less healthy ways. But what I really want to talk about is the death of the American constitutional order. And yes, it's as dead as Norman Bates' mom. And the people in charge of it are running around in its clothes murdering people. Also, spoilers for a movie that came out in 1960. Look out, by the end I might spoil a Sophocles play. Now, I realize this is a big claim, but to even understand it, we have to address three questions. 1, what is a constitution? 2, what was our constitution? And 3, what happened? First, what is a constitution? According to Joseph de Maistre, a constitution isn't in the first place a document. It's a nation's history, traditions, and social fabric. It's the unspoken things that constitute a nation. Before it's written, it's unwritten. Shout out Natasha Bedingfield. For de Maistre, societies can't be rationally designed from scratch. Instead, constitutions evolve organically over generations from a people's unique character and experiences. So you can't make a society with pen and paper. The same way you can't go up to a garbage dump and just put up a sign that says, "This is a farm now." Well, you could, but you get it. In his view, written constitutions are weaker than unwritten ones. There are some things you shouldn't have to write down because they're so fundamental. We tend to write things down when they're in trouble. Take the YouTube channel Pasta Grannies. The reason there's 500 videos of old Italian ladies making noodles is because they're some of the only people on the planet who still have these particular skills. These are the real female superheroes. Eat your heart out, Feige. In a healthier time, these things were passed down organically. We're only writing down these recipes when we're afraid we might forget them. But back to the political. A healthy society doesn't need a law against transing kids. It's just assumed. Just like a healthy business doesn't need a rule against cooking meth in the bathrooms. Even biblical law wasn't given to Israel because they were doing so well. But as decline sets in, more and more gets codified in an attempt to stop it. You get lawmakers chasing societal decay with a legislative pooper scooper. In short, the American Constitution was created by and for a certain kind of people. And you can't separate the document from the people it was written for. John Adams said it was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. And as Aaron McIntyre has pointed out many times, we are no longer moral or religious. So let's do some logic here. And if you're not familiar,
it's a kind of a pattern of syllogistic.
So, premise 1. The Constitution is made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. Premise 2. America is not a moral or religious people. And conclusion, the Constitution is inadequate to the government of America. That's what you logic heads out there might call a valid argument, the kind you can't deny without denying one of the premises.
Good God, isn't that something?
But it's not like only the unwritten Constitution changed. The written one has too. But that leads us to the next question. What was our Constitution? Now, the American Constitution has a reputation. It's known for certain key themes, many of which might fall under the heading of limited government. Separation of powers, checks and balances, federalism, the Bill of Rights. The Constitution was designed so that power wouldn't become too concentrated. That way the government would never do anything crazy, like kidnap your kids and give them sex changes. So the next question is, what happened? Aaron McIntyre's book, The Total State, does an excellent job answering this question. Buy it, buy it, buy it. But today I want to look at a complementary answer from Curtis Yarvin, seen here modeling the official Gen Xer Halloween costume. In his essay, The Iron Polygon, Yarvin says that our country has gone through at least a handful of different republics, different forms of government, each building on the one before, and each in their own way destroying the foundations of the old order. First, there was the Congressional Republic, the Republic of the Articles of Confederation. It wasn't around long, but we loved it while it lasted, sort of like Twin Peaks or the McHotdog. People say that the only thing wrong with this period was that the Articles of Confederation were too weak, but I think the worst part is that they were still more than 200 years away from this all-American treat. Yes, the meat is the same color as the bun, but that's because we don't judge by color here. Next, there was the Constitutional Republic. This is the one people think they still live in. But the truth is that most people, even many who call themselves conservatives, would be horrified to live in this time. In this era, American states had Christian blasphemy laws, Sabbath laws, state-level Christian establishments, and in some cases, religious tests for office. Things that if you advocated for today, people would call you names and kick you out of their conferences. What most people mean when they say they want to return to constitutionalism is to return to either the 1950s or the 1990s. But if they were transported back to the actual constitutional order, they'd be horrified to see neither sock hops nor crop tops, mostly just tobacco crops and blacksmith shops. And the legal constitutional order ended about 150 years ago with the Third Republic, what Yarvin calls the Unionist Republic of the post-Civil War period. This republic, Yarvin says, abolished federalism. See, originally the states created the federal government to serve them. Now it was the other way around. There's a lot we could say about the Civil War, but as Basil Gildersleeve said, it was a point of grammatical concord which was at the bottom of the Civil War. United States are, said said one, United States is said another. Going to war over grammar might seem extreme to you, but is it any more insane than going to war over gay rights in Kandahar? But the grammatical point was an important one, and one worth fighting about. There was also the passing of the 14th Amendment, which Steve Wilkins does a great job explaining here. CanonPlus.com, promo code WADE99, you know the drill. Also, Lincoln established everyone's favorite government agency, the IRS, something they didn't cover in the 2012 film. And I don't see why not. It's not like it would have made the movie more boring. Don't worry, I won't spoil that ending. But the reason the Civil War is a hot topic today is that these are still live issues. Then there was the Fourth Republic, what Yarvin calls the New Deal regime, FDR's republic, which he says abolished limited government. FDR is the one who created most of the alphabet agencies, also known as the administrative state. He's basically the Walt Disney of the swamp. FDR renamed and expanded the FBI. He created the OSS, which turned into the CIA. These moves expanded the power of the executive branch, but destroyed the power of every future president. That's because these agencies are technically part of the executive branch, but actively work against the president, especially if it's Trump. Without these agencies, we wouldn't have had Russiagate, the Mar-a-Lago raid, or this genius. Because this was the beginning of rule by experts. And as Michael Anton has said, rule by experts just means rule by elite opinion. And if you haven't noticed, elite opinion hates your guts. But these are the kind of rulers that don't want you to notice that they're ruling. Here's Yarvin. The key to power in the Fourth Republic is that no one who has power wants anyone to think of them as having power. No one in the U.S. is scheming for power. A lot of them seem to be working for change. No one in the U.S. is brainwashing the masses. A lot of them seem to be educating the public. No one in the U.S. is ruling the world. A lot of them seem to be making global policies. They're just here to help out. And why would you be scared of someone who's just trying to help out? The FBI, that's just Andy Griffith with more money and machine guns. So that's the Fourth Republic, and that's where Yarvin's essay ends. But Aaron McIntyre and the guys from the Good Old Boys podcast suggest that we're now living in a Fifth Republic, the civil rights regime, which abolished just about everything that was left. The strong man behind this republic was LBJ, who is the answer to the question,
who do you think is the most unattractive world leader?
He was basically the closest we ever got to President Blobfish. The first person I heard criticize the Civil Rights Act was Rand Paul. Then I saw Pastor Doug Wilson echoing those criticisms. But until I read Christopher Caldwell's book, The Age of Entitlement, I didn't realize how much it had transformed the country. Caldwell argues that they had inadvertently voted themselves a second constitution without explicitly repealing the one they had. Each constitution contained guarantees. But the Civil Rights Act made it the job of the government to root out inequality, which means rooting out bias. What we call political correctness is the natural outcome of civil rights, which makes fighting bias a condition for the legitimacy of the state. Once bias is held to be part of the unconscious of human nature, there are no areas of human life in which the state's vigilance is not called for. So this is the republic we live in now, and whatever you call it, it's not the 1789 constitutional order. People assume that if you think the constitutional order is dead, you're necessarily faulting the founders, as if we think they could have tweaked a few words 250 years ago and none of this bad stuff would have happened. People have this idea that the founders started the country and we've been living in the world they created ever since. But that world is gone. We can't go back to it. I tweeted a few thoughts about this, and Joel Berry asked a fair question. What should we do next? Some of the books I've mentioned here have done that work, and there are a lot of folks building the future now. A lot of the current conversation around this was started by a tweet from Nate Fisher, and he's one of the guys doing that work. An American order existed here in the past, and there are still traces of it. Whatever we do next, it needs to draw on that heritage. It needs to be, at heart, American. The question of what to do is a great one, but once we get the diagnosis straight, any conversation about a treatment plan will be easier to have. If a guy has cancer but thinks he has a cold, it's going to be really hard to convince him to get surgery and start chemo. Politically, I think one of the steps forward will be a lot of cutting back, much of which will be scary to modern conservatives. If we think that the current system is the constitutional one, people will think we're gutting America of what it is. If a president came in and abolished the CIA, some people would reflexively call that unconstitutional, even though that would make no sense on strict definitions. As Nate points out here, our constitutional republic typically is a stand-in phrase for the status quo, so it's hard to make big changes to the status quo without conservatives lashing out. We actually can have a government that stops getting in the way of people being normal, and there may even be ways to positively encourage that. On top of that, the people themselves have to embrace and celebrate normalcy. As I've said before, the solution is top-down and bottom-up. The problems are way bigger than most conservatives think, and so the solutions are going to take a lot more work than conservatives are used to talking about. This video is just about knowing what time it is. We need to be grateful for the actual American inheritance, tear down what we need to, and strengthen the things that remain, which might be more than we think. In other words, you might be depressed about the state of America, but I wouldn't stab your eyes out and run into the wilderness just yet. What do you know? I did spoil it. Oops.